After analyzing hundreds of student reading samples, I've noticed a pattern. When we don't understand how the NeuroReading Circuit is working, remediation becomes more practice instead of more precision. I call this spaghetti remediation. We throw more at the students, more drills, more repetition, more time, hoping something sticks. But reading is not a wall for noodles. And when we measure only what's easy to count, we can completely miss the thinking student sitting right in front of us. What spaghetti remediation looks like. Spaghetti remediation increases intensity, more phonics drills, extra worksheets, more repetition, everything gets slower and louder. There's nothing inherently wrong with these tools, but here's the pivot. Intensity is not the same thing as precision. If we've not identified which part of the reading circuit needs support, then we're just guessing. And guessing gets expensive. The cost of getting it wrong. Spaghetti remediation always comes at a cost of at least 3 things. First is the cost of time. Lost specials, missed enrichment, lost free time for summer programs, lost years when students are made to repeat grades. Time is not neutral. It's our most valuable asset, and our children only get one childhood. The second cost is self-worth. Students will internalize thoughts like, I'm behind, I need extra because I can't. That gets extrapolated into deeper thoughts like, I'm stupid or I'm not worth it. And when those beliefs settle in, the emotional center, the brain's learning switch, dims. Nothing good comes after that happens. That's not fragility, it's just basic neuroscience. And the final cost is joy. Joy literally opens learning pathways in our brain with lots of extra chemicals that support learning. But chronic pressure, on the other hand, sucks all those positive resources in and holds the student in a state of stress. Paradoxically, we increase intensity to improve reading and then accidentally shut down the very circuits needed to grow it. That's what happens when we ignore how the brain processes reading. The NeuroReading Circuit. Reading is not linear. Students don't move neatly from decoding to fluency to comprehension in a straight line. Reading works more like a circuit. In fact, it is a circuit. I call it the NeuroReading Circuit. I go into greater detail on the NeuroReading Circuit in other videos, but in short, there are 3 integrated channels that fire together automatically when we read. One is the symbol channel, which asks, what does the word look like? At the same time, the grammar channel asks, what would sound right? All while the context channel asks, what would make sense here? When those channels are working together smoothly, reading feels very natural. But when one channel is overloaded or another isn't fully engaged, then the system becomes strained. And this is where nuance lives, because a student can read smoothly and not be thinking very deeply, and a student can sound choppy while thinking brilliantly. One of the ways we make those patterns visible is through an informal diagnostic process called miscue analysis. Instead of simply counting mistakes, as some assessments do, a miscue analysis looks closely at those mistakes and asks, what channel prompted the student to say this? The miscue analysis makes students' use of those invisible processing channels visible. And that shows us how those signals interact as students read. That's how we move from guessing to targeting. Snapshot number 1. Let me give you a quick example of a student who comes to mind. He read beautifully, very smooth, expressive, on pace. On the surface, his reading seemed very solid and confident. But when I asked deeper comprehension questions, his answers were thin. Retellings lacked detail, inferences were shallow, important ideas were totally missed. So for him, the symbol channel was flowing, the grammar channel sounded very natural, but he wasn't actively connecting with the text. There was no evidence of him using strategies to build a mental model, link ideas together, monitor meaning, ask internal questions. His reading sounded strong, but he wasn't making meaning from the text. So this wasn't a fluency or a decoding problem. It was a metacognitive problem. So obviously, giving him more fluency or phonics drills is not what he needed. He also didn't need more speed or decoding practice. What he needed were tools for thinking while reading. Snapshot number 2. Now, let me tell you about a 7-year-old. On paper, her fluency, which is accuracy when reading out loud, was 200% lower than the standard benchmark. 200% lower. The recommendation from school was for her to repeat first grade and double down on phonics. But here's what I observed. She read aloud with me and asked thoughtful questions as she went. On her own initiative, she paused at one point and made a prediction, so that showed me that she was making meaning as she was reading. At one point, we paused so that I could select a new reading passage for her, and she looked out my kitchen window, saw 4 straw bales, and asked, "Are you making a garden or a barn?" Well, that was pretty good inferential thinking. And when I told her it was a garden, she replied with an immediate connection to the 3 little pigs, telling me that I should test the strength of the straw. So that was making a spontaneous world-to-text connection. But back to her reading, she self-corrected constantly, she monitored meaning, she was engaged, and she answered every comprehension question correctly. I even took her 1 grade level above where she was currently, and comprehension was solid there. So yes, she sounded choppy, but she was thinking beautifully. Frankly, her use of higher level thinking skills was among the very best I've ever seen at that age. Her symbol, grammar, and context channels were all firing. Her only issue is that the flow hadn't fully integrated yet. So if I had only looked at her low fluency, which, as I cover in another video, is something that teachers are usually trained to do, I would have missed the 100% thinker. Repeating 1st grade would have been devastatingly boring for her. It would have been a fast path towards frustration and shutting down engagement of a truly brilliant mind. One example of the high cost of spaghetti remediation. So, what works? Well, while spaghetti remediation increases pressure, targeted remediation increases precision. So first and foremost, targeted support begins by diagnosing reading strengths with a miscue analysis. We then leverage those strengths to fill gaps. More importantly, we teach these reading channels to students and show them exactly how their reading brain is working. And this goes a long way in preserving their self-worth. Plus, that metacognitive insight has the added benefit of improving their reading skills because it builds the bridge for teaching students how to think while reading, not just how to sound fluent. There are almost endless benefits to diagnosing reading strengths as our first step towards remediation, but there are 2 other factors that make remediation effective, and they include activating joy with high-interest reading material and providing frequent feedback loops to optimize efficiency. So this shortens the learning process, which ultimately frees up students' precious time. Overall, this approach of precision respects the whole student, and that's just another layer that reinforces faster learning, spinning this entire effort into an engaging upward spiral. The paradox. In reading instruction, there's always a paradox, and for remediation, it's this. Sometimes the reader who sounds the weakest is the strongest thinker in the room. And sometimes the smoothest reader hasn't yet learned how to think while reading. We cannot diagnose a reading brain simply by how it sounds. Some students sound stronger than they comprehend, and some comprehend stronger than they sound, and there's a lot of variance in between. Deeper analysis tells the difference. If we only look at the surface, then we respond with pressure. But when we make the reading circuit visible and analyze miscues, remediation stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like precision. In the next video, I go a little bit deeper, exploring exactly how strong readers sometimes get mislabeled. It's largely because of the natural limitations of testing reading, and we talk about what we can do about that. If this video made you question whether your child or teen has been measured accurately, the first step is understanding how the human learning system actually works. I have a free masterclass linked below where I walk through how reading, motivation, executive function, how they all fit together so that you can see the full architecture instead of simply reacting to one score. And if you find yourself wanting a more personalized look at your child or teen's reading patterns, I do work directly with families as well. You can explore that below when you're ready. Reading is the gateway skill. Learning is the long game. And when we see the structure clearly, better decisions follow.